dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're continuing our China special with Liberty Nation's national security correspondent, Dave Patterson. Thanks for being here, Dave.
Thank you, Mark.
So, Dave, China it's kind of having some strange outlay patterns on the world stage. There's a couple of data points that I want to drop down, a couple of pins, and if you could sort of navigate us around those, if you don't mind. So, number one, they've been strangely absent from the entire Iranian affair.
Yes, they have, and I think it's very simple. From their perspective, they have quite a bit of at stake in terms of the oil they get from Iran. Data point one.
Right.
And they're not sure exactly how to respond to the U.S. versus Iran, but they know they don't want to do anything that will stop the flow of that oil. They know that.
Yeah, so there's I believe it's Iran produces 3 million barrels a day. Much of that goes to the Asian market, and that's an exposure for China, whereas the U.S. doesn't really rely on Iran for its oil capacity or oil production. So one could argue, if we're conspiratorially minded, that a good way to slow down the Chinese engine of industry is to hit out at its energy suppliers. And so, yeah, it kind of puts them in a tricky position, right? They can't really side with the U.S. against shutting down what is essentially a rogue state with the potential for nuclear weapons. But at the same time, they don't annoy Iran too much, right?
That's right. I mean, so because Iran, quite frankly, is the portal for China into the Middle East, and they've milked that pretty well. I mean, the fact that they brokered the peace agreement, that may be too strong a term. They brokered the renewal of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and so that was a big door opener for them. And now they're conflicted because they can't support Iran too heavily here, because if they do that, the United States will simply cut that oil off.
Yeah.
And so they're walking a fine line here with Iran, but what do you expect? It's the Middle East, right?
Yes, allegiances change rather swiftly. And just for those who may be interested, before recording, David and I were having a debate discussion on the various Herods, Herod Agrippa and whatnot, and how these power plays were taking place, because we don't have enough to do with our lives other than discuss 2,000-year-old Middle Eastern history. So the second data point to drop in on this is China avoided the recent BRICS.
Yeah, that's right. Xi Jinping decided not to attend, and his presence really has traditionally been the glue that holds it all together. And I mean, you've got Brazil and India and China and Russia and Spain. How do you figure that one? I don't know.
Spain.
Right.
Hey, hang on. That's a joke, right?
Right.
You had me.
Yes, right here.
You had me. Okay.
But it's quite. Many of the pundits think that there's something going on internal to China in terms of power plays and leadership changes, and they've just fired one of the ministers in China most recently, and so it may be that the turmoil within China's leadership has caused President Xi to take the course of minding his own store before he starts to mind the world's.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. There's also, from a strategic point of view, is we say BRICS, and obviously not including Spain. I remember the reference now. It was Donald Trump in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've always, from the outside of those countries, we've always looked at it as this is a coherent block that are all working to maintain separate but together economic power. But it could be now, and I may have this on the wrong, but each of these individual nations now, they're at the point where they don't need the cooperation so much. And so now they've become active economic competitors. And therefore, China's involvement with them as competitors is not as conducive to leading the group now, because they're each wanting to lead their own path rather than rely on China. And so if President Xi Jinping went there and he's got these other nations saying, well, we're actually forging this path, it might be quite embarrassing in terms of, and I'm sure embarrassment itself is not a big issue. He's a very thick-skinned guy, Xi Jinping. But in terms of, it would look like a loss of face if he goes there and then each individual branch is leading its kind of its own path through the economic jungle, as it were. And so by not being there, he can say, well, they're free to go their own way now, rather than
A good
that
example.
dominion.
A good example would be, Brazil. Brazil has a lot of rare earth minerals.
Yeah.
So does China. So who needs China?
Right.
And that's a marketplace in which Brazil competes actually better.
Yeah, and of course, for President Trump, with this ongoing tariffs war, the rare earth minerals and whatnot, that's a huge point of contention, because
It is.
pretty much everything requires them nowadays.
And the sad part about that, and it's not true about all of the rare earth resources,
Sure.
but enough of them to be significant, and that is that we have the very same thing in the United States, but we have been loath to exploit it to the extent to which we could build a competing market. I think that's changing, but
Yeah.
up until recently, we have all of this land in California and Arizona and I think in New Mexico as well, that is quite rich in the kinds of things that we need, but it's takes so much effort to get it out that until recently it's not been economically feasible. But now it is.
Well, it's funny, and this is very much a tangential point. The United Kingdom, my home turf, has such natural gas resources
Absolutely.
that it could become a net exporter of energy in a very short space of time, because it's not that difficult to set up mini plants at the main deposit sites, and it could do it. I'm saying 12 months. You could have production started on these things, but it chooses not to politically, and therefore Britons pay the highest energy prices in the world because of green levies, subsidies, weird tax breaks for green energy companies, and we end up buying our energy from overseas when we have such resources under the ground. And it's crippling the UK economy, this failure to take advantage of the resources you have.
Well, that's what Trump ran on, and that was one of the key elements to, I think, that helped him win, is this idea of energy independence. And to follow up on that a little bit, and it doesn't take but about a couple of data points to pull the thread through this, and to see Donald Trump's executive order for the enhancement of nuclear energy, and particularly small modular reactors.
Yes.
Yeah, and quite frankly, from a national security perspective, having a small modular reactor in, at each of the bases would absolutely free them from any problems with big grid issues, and would make the energy issues for the major bases and military installations far better than they are now. And I think that that's something that we need to watch very carefully, but it also represents a hedge against China.
Yeah. Yeah, it's whoever makes the most. Who was it who said whoever makes the most steel wins the war? But I guess that was whoever can produce the most energy has the advantage there. Dave, I just want to go into one more thing before we finish up, and that is there was
one more answer.
well, what a great congruence. So there was a recent story in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago about an alleged 8-page document from the FSB, the Russian Secret Service, and it was that they're beginning to worry. The Russians are beginning to worry that China's setting its eyes northwards to Siberia rather than focusing southeastwards towards Taiwan in terms of resource exploitation.
Well, I think that you have to always realize that, if true, China has a very long-term framework, a decision horizon, and I don't think that Russia has to worry about anything within the next 2 weeks.
Sure.
But it's entirely possible that the FSB is correct about China's long-term designs on their neighbor to the north. This is not new. This has been a concern for the Soviet Union and for Russia after 1990, that China would see Siberia particularly as a target for exploitation. And think back, Gromyko and all of the leadership in the Soviet Union. This was a concern of theirs for a very, very long time.
Yeah, valid point, Dave. We're going to be back with Dave Patterson after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril. Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.